I'm Mohana, and HR Unplugged is brought to you by Better Place exclusively for each one of you. From creating designing values to actually creating organization structures, next-gen cool policies, CHROs are playing such crucial roles across organizations. In HR Unplugged, we aspire to bring to you some of the coolest people, most courageous leaders of the industry who have actually helped shape the landscape of people through industry itself. And simply put, they're some of the most amazing people, interesting work that they have done, and hold a larger than life attitude. So come join me as I deep dive and have meaningful conversations with our CHROs and HR leaders and understand their thoughts and get to know them better. See you there. My guest today is Abhay Singh. He's the Senior Director and Head of HR of Applied Materials India. Applied Materials is an American corporation that supplies equipment, services, software to build semiconductor chips. Abhay has 25 plus years experience in Dell, Applied Materials, Intel, and Motorola overall. His career is a great example of how you can build careers patiently and in a dedicated effort towards building one space over a period of time, exhibiting growth and commitment. So come join me as me and Abhay will talk about interesting HR topics and we get to know him and his leadership style better. Abhay, welcome to HR Unplugged. It's such a pleasure to have you here with us.
Mona, thank you so much for this invite. I've been, ever since you spoke to me about this, I've been pretty excited. I've not done something like this too often, so thank you for having me with you.
Abhay, I want to basically begin this conversation on a very positive note. I remember a couple of years after COVID, right? Just after COVID, a few years back, we met. And the whole evening we were laughing, and what a way to meet people, right? And it was one of the most memorable things for me that I have, held on in my life as well. And that's the evening when you had shared when we met that you started off your life, and a significant part of like that first few steps that you take, right? Choosing your career, choosing your path ahead, was in the army. Now, I don't know how many people outside of your friend circle or your own team and your community know about this, but being in the army is so fascinating. A lot of us have so much respect. How was that like? What were the most memorable things for you there?
I think a good place to start, because after I finished my graduation, I'm from Bombay, I don't know if you know that. After I finished my graduation from there, I joined the army. And if you ask me, I was there for 5 years approximately. It was undeniably the most memorable experience of my life. I mean, don't think I had such an experience in any other organizations that I've been post the army. For me, what made it a little different the army too, in my 5 years, out of the 5 years, 3 years I was in a conflict zone.
Wow.
So when you're in the conflict zone, the bonds that you make with people, the friendships that you create, stay with you forever. Okay? So I think what really stayed with me, and it continues to stay with, and now it's been many, many years now, is the camaraderie that you build over there, the bonds that you build, and the level of collaboration that happens over there. And one of the things that also I saw was what it takes to be an inspired leader. Okay. The other thing which stays with me and I cherish a lot is the celebration of festivals. And why I say that, I was in a battalion where we had troops from the north. So for them, celebration of festivals like Dussehra and Holi was such big deals. They would be, celebrate so much of gusto and enthusiasm. I think those are two very, very important memories which I carry with me all my life.
Oh, that's amazing. And sometimes you're with your families, sometimes you're not with your families, and still to see this spirit of, in spite of being in a conflict zone, to have that attitude, right? That's just incredible. Thank you for sharing that. That's so nice to hear. I also know that you made a conscious decision to move into personnel management and IR back in the 90s, early 90s, and joined a wonderful institute, right, in Mumbai again. So what was that like coming, and making that important shift in your life away from something so significant to another significant thing that has become your career now?
Sure. When I think back about it, the army and this, corporate life, they're two very different industries. But there are a few things that remain unchanged, and especially for an HR professional. I mean, think about it. What is the army all about? the army is all about motivating your people.
Yeah.
You know, motivating to a sense where they're ready to risk their life for a much bigger cause. And I think, an HR people, I think that's what we are always here to do. How do we get our people to, to fulfill their own potentials? So there are a few things that I find a lot of similarities, which I really want to mention out here. One is this whole thing about, trust and loyalty. Now, trust and loyalty is something which is very strong in the army, and I think that works for all of us in any of the corporates that we work in. Okay? The other thing which I found very useful, which was a huge learning for me, which I could take to the, the corporate world, is the army has some of the strongest and finest systems in the world. Because if you don't follow systems in the army, you could get hurt or you could get killed.
Right.
So, and I also strongly believe, I'm a very structured person. I believe structure is important in an organization. But I do want to add one thing. In the civil world, your structures cannot be so strong that they curb your innovation and your out-of-box thinking.
Sure.
Okay? So those are things that I think are the similarities that I find very, very, common between the army and the, people working in the HR field.
Okay. Was that something that was that an immediate contrast when you went to college as well?
When I went to...
when you joined TISS, and I think TISS came after you had spent some years, right, in the army. So was that like too unstructured in college, or, because once you're in the army,
Sure. That was interesting because, I had, before I joined TISS, I had done 5 years there, and I think I joined, after I left the army, I joined TISS in a span of about 3 months.
Okay.
I left, I think, sometime in Feb, and I joined in the month of March, April. I think that's when I sessioned, May, June.
Yeah.
So at that point when I went to TISS, I was yet living and breathing the culture of the army.
Right.
So when I first came to TISS, this whole bohemian lifestyle that we have, and you know that as much as I do, was something which it quite bewildered me, and I was a little amazed that, then how can people walk around with chappals and, round neck t-shirts all the time? But the fact that I was from Bombay, and I took that to that culture pretty fast. And over a period of time, I just got into that culture of candlelight dinners and all that crazy stuff that people do in TISS. So, it was an initial culture shock. But I think one blends into that very, very quickly. At least I did.
Right. And I think change, that's the thing, right? That change happens. And it's really about how we take to that change as well. That really creates a different type of experience, which can be good or otherwise. And I think this is where you actually end up meeting your wife and your family today. And that's what I noticed, that evening when we all spent time together, almost everyone in your batch was actually married to one another. And I see that changing a lot these days as well. But what was that experience of 2 years learning HR, so intensely? What was that experience in the institute like for you?
So honestly, the learning experience was great. I think during our times, and I'm sure it had not changed now, we had some of the best professors in the industry. I mean, I don't think we had people who were just amazing. And it was a little different from the structured life that I came from. Because army was all about, you listen, you don't talk. Out here, it's more, you're allowed to express your feelings, you're allowed to express your thoughts. And I found that amazing. And also in this, one of the things is that, most of the students live on campus. So there was a lot of, there was very open interaction and, mixing of people through the day. So you're right. There was a lot of campus romance that happened that time. A lot of people did, meet their life partners during those days. And I met Ritu, my wife, while she was on campus. She, by the way, did her MSW, Master in Social Work.
Right.
And we hit it off pretty quickly because both of us had two big passions. Both of us have the, great love for reading and for travel. So, we were going around campus, and as soon as we passed out, I think we got married. So I've been married for about 29 years now, and I've got 2 grown-up children.
That's amazing. Yeah. No, that's wonderful. And tell me, just a few more things about just yourself, right? What I notice is that you're extremely positive. You're extremely welcoming as a person, and always smiling Abhay every time we met. Was that something natural, or was that something that your environment actually helped you develop? And how has that helped shape your career, your life overall?
Thanks for saying that. I don't know whether I really smile as much as I should, but I think these are one of the life lessons that I learned is a calm and relaxed person with a smile on his face is much more successful than an angry person. You know, if you really want to get into a real conversation with someone, there are two things you need to do. Firstly, you need to be there with a calm mind, with a smile on your face, and listen to that person.
Yeah.
And when you're calm, you listen to someone. When you're angry, you do not, because you're only hearing yourself talk. Yeah. So I found that, over a period of time to be something which, has given me a lot of positive results. Yeah. And I can really close real issues with people, instead of just getting into a conflict, every time we talk. Yeah. And yes, I try very hard to make sure, I smile a lot, because I think that's an important part of life. And that's the whole idea is to, make every conversation, a very positive and happy environment for us to interact.
What I really liked is the fact that you said when you're angry, you are just listening to yourself, right? Or you're hearing yourself, more to say that. It's incredible, because a lot of times we don't really realize these things as well in our interactions, and how we can actually influence others, right? Just by those small acts as well.
True.
So thank you for sharing that. And one of the things that we were talking about a little while back as well, Abhay, is that, a key contributor to your long-term success, of course, you're saying, is your personality, your characteristics that you build. The smile, it can make a huge difference as well. But today, what we are thinking and we are seeing actually, and the workforce that I noticed and I'm managing as well, it's very common to be open to change, and it's very common to be open to change in regards to actually having your careers and managing your careers, right? So for me, when I started my career, it was quite unthinkable that I actually could move jobs so frequently. But having said that, in the last 16 odd years, I have moved a few jobs. But the generation that we are working with is so open to it. Now, I'm wondering that, what are your thoughts on this, right? Because is that a good thing in the long term? Is that something that actually is very positive? Am I missing something? Or is that, are they missing something when they don't have a very steady long-term career? So that trend has become very, steady now, that the younger generation largely seems to want to look for multiple experiences in a very short period of time. So I'd love to understand your views, since you've been in the industry for so many years as well.
Sure. If you recall, I think when you had spoken once over the phone, or I think was it the last time we met, I told you, I think in any career, it's very important to be patient. I think patience is a virtue. Now, I personally think, and people have got different career paths, so I'm not going to comment on, is that the right way? I'm going to talk about myself and what I believe has worked for me and what I think is important. Yeah. For me, stability is the key to success in the organization. And while I say that, I will also say, not too many, but I've had my share of moving from a few companies. But overall, in my career lifespan, I've spent time in mainly two companies. One of my first companies was Motorola. I was there for 10 years. And now my current company, Applied, where I'm there for 16 years. So these are two things. Now there's other, when I was in Motorola, there was one very important life lesson that I learned from one of my managers, one guy called Akhil Basrai. Excellent guy. He was the head of Motorola. On his desk, he had a very simple plaque which said, "This too shall pass." I think that's a very simple message, but there's something very profound about it. The fact that, we, in all organizations, like in life, you go through bad times and good times. Bad times never last. Bad times will transcend to good times, and so I try to make that my life mantra, that if I'm going through a bad time, this too shall pass. Right. And I think that has truly helped me in terms of the stability that I believe is important. Yeah. And I do agree with you that a lot of young kids move, and they generally move for, more salary, better, hopefully a bigger job. But I think, and again I'm saying this is a personal thing, staying in one company over a period of time gives you all the rewards and gives you the career aspiration. You can meet your career aspirations in that company. Yeah. A lot of us also mainly leave our jobs because of bad managers. Of course. Yeah. But again, that's something that we need to deal with. There is no guarantee that you're not going to get a equally bad manager. You're going to get a damn good manager in the next job. Yeah. So I think that's where patience helps, and I think that I've tried to make that my mantra, and that's something which I always try to tell my teams. You know, learn to cope with the bad times as you'd cope with the good times.
Yeah.
So,
No, absolutely. And I think my next question would have been just around the fact that you talked about this too shall pass, right? How are we actually dealing with difficult situations, difficult times, taking the right kind of decision that can shape us as better human beings, better professionals as well? What I also notice is, you know, if you're having a tough conversation, specifically with, you know, the millennials and, you know, the Gen Z population that comes into workplace, right? They're very self-aware. They're largely very self-aware. They have a lot of access to information. So you cannot guide them the way we used to get guided in, you know, when at least in early 2000 when I started my career, I was very much guided about my career. But today people are self-aware, they have access to things. So you're actually just in a relationship which is quite mutually at par.
Sure.
And therefore you can suggest and recommend at max, right? But having said that, what I've noticed also is that the resilience that they actually exhibit is quite low comparatively compared to the previous generations. Why do you think that's happening? What could people do to actually take better you know, care of themselves from a mental strength standpoint? Because ups and downs, like you correctly said, you move different jobs, you will have different managers, but how do you actually leverage that for your own development? But not give up very soon, right? That seems to be like a small trend that's also coming up, where mental strength, resilience, these are topics of the next generation which are going to become problematic eventually.
True.
Yeah. So what could people do, Abhay, in terms of, you know, taking care of themselves? What are one or two things that could help support building mental strength?
So, you know, let me first, I mean, that's a long question that you asked me, but let me start with the first one that you know, your first part of the question, where you spoke about your leader telling you, or someone telling you what you need to do to build a career. Okay? So the way I look at it, today the role of a manager, the role of a corporation, of a company, is not to, you know, provide a given career path for everyone. No one can do that. Everyone owns their own careers. You cannot have a company saying this is exactly what's going to happen to you in 5 years. The role of a company should stop at how do you build capabilities and how do you provide platforms for him or her to grow within that organization. I think that should be, you know, the first part of your question in terms of how do I build this, help people build their careers out here. You own your own career at the end of it. But all I can do as a company is help you meet your result. The other, in terms of mental resilience, yes and no. I think some of the kids today are as much self-aware as maybe I was, you know. And I think one of the things that it is, again, I'm going to talk about how things that have helped me is, I think, you know, I believe a lot in physical activities. I believe a lot in physical fitness. I believe a lot in a little degree of meditation. I could do a little bit more about it. I think these are things that, you know, help you in your long. You need to have a life outside the organization. It cannot just be work. Okay, you just need to. I mean, I'm not trying to boast, but you know, a couple of months ago, I had gone for the Everest Base Camp.
Oh,
you know,
wow.
Now, these are things, but you have to build up these things, because these are that build your mental resilience, and they give you, you know, you get more out of life while doing that. Yes, you need to put in your 8 hours or 9 hours or 10 hours, whatever you do in office, but it doesn't mean that's you stop at that as a life. And the company cannot help you much with that. Of course, we'll talk about that later, maybe in terms of how the expectations from employees are changing. But I think for me, mental resilience means I have a full life which I want to live.
That's wonderful, because we don't realize that, you know, the number of hours we spend at work. Like, even personally, I'm spending 10 hours minimum. And it's the same people around you. They become your community. They become your friends, right, at work.
They become your family.
They become your family at work as well. And many times that becomes your whole ecosystem, and you're not doing anything beyond that. That by itself can cause a different type of stress in a difficult situation. So having that perspective and that different lens by doing many other things builds character, builds your personality as well, right? So that's great. That's an interesting input, Abhay.
I must also want to, if I can add out here to what you is having friends in the workplace is very important. Don't you know, ever discount that part.
Yeah, in fact, most of my friends today are friends that I acquired in my professional life. They are like my family today. And for some reason, we become closer after we leave the company on a lighter note. But you do make friends. It is incorrect to think that you cannot make friends at work as well. So I just want to, go back a little to what you talked about, right? Patience in your career, having longer careers, just going on a marathon, that's really how your career journey can be, right? But what are one or two things that actually helped you succeed in your career? And I think what, people who are listening, watching can actually benefit from listening to this.
Sure. So I'm going to talk more about applied because that's, I believe I've spent the largest, amount of time in this organization. And there are a handful of things that, I believe has helped me, I wouldn't say succeed, I don't want to be said pompous about that, but help me survive in this company. One is, for me, is the values that this company holds. One of our core values of Applied Materials is ethics and integrity. That resonates a lot with my personal value beliefs and my value systems. I believe I am an honest person, and I believe that is the only way to live in life, because that gives you the happiness and that gives you the mental strength to move. So that is something which has really helped me.
So resonating your personal values
with the
values of the company. In fact, just a data point to add, high potential, employees find a way to connect their own personal ambition to the company's ambition. So a lot of these things are very virtuous situations, right? Yeah, please.
So that's definitely one. The other thing, I think there are 2-3 things that come to my mind. The other one, and I, echoing what you said, is in an organization, we spend more waking hours in office than we spend at home.
Yeah.
That's a given. What, for me, what has really helped is, over these years, I've built some very strong personal relationships in the organization. Well, people who are friends today, and I know they'll remain friends with me for a long time.
Sure.
So can you imagine the agony and the drudgery to a person who comes to office and he has no friends, he doesn't know who to talk to, or it just at a very transactional level everything happens. So I think people need to create relationships, create friendship within the organization. The other thing which has really helped me, if I may say, succeed in this organization is networking across the organization. I work for an organization which has got, it's a multinational, so we have, offices across the world. Before COVID time, of course now thanks to COVID, our travel has been restricted, but before COVID, I will make it a point to travel to the US at least twice a year and go to almost every Asian country once a year.
Sure.
Now that networking is so important because then you're dealing with, you're dealing with the face, not just with over someone on the email, and you're dealing not just with the voice. And this networking I've seen has helped me, if I need information or I need to get something completed. It's so much easier to call that person and say, hey Robert, hey John, man, Abhai here, I need this urgently, can you help me? And instead of sending an email to an anonymous person who doesn't know he knows that I'm someone in. So one of the things I always tell my team, network. It is so important for, we are so used to just sending an email and hoping things get done. And there's so much faster and quicker to just pick up the phone or just go walk across someone's table and say, let's sit down and get this done.
Yeah, I think these don't change, right? Whichever decade you're in, wherever you are. And also more and more, because most organizations, I would tend to say that organizations these days are actually global organizations. You're interacting virtually with people. Irrespective of whether you're in Bangalore, you're still working with colleagues in another city, right? So there's so much of an important aspect of knowing each other that becomes very important in your career at the end of the day. Yeah.
One more thing which I think is has been important for me, and I believe it works for everyone, is never take a job for granted. Never. I mean, I've been here 16 years, but I think at least I believe that every day I go to office, I should go with the same enthusiasm that I go with the first day. Because it's very easy to take a job for granted and say, I've done this enough, I don't think
At least 10 years back, Abhay, there were fewer jobs and the market is flooded with jobs, right? At any given good point, on an average, people do have options. So how do they value their jobs? Of course, it's the connect to the job, the difference I'm making, but how do I consciously help myself understand that I cannot take that experience for granted?
Yeah. So it's just, that's a personal thing. Where you just, every time you come to office, you need to remind yourself. And let's face it, these corporations help, me run my house, pay my bill, helps me send my children to good schools. I should be grateful for that, and I should give them the best that I have.
I can.
And I think I've again used that one of the mantras of my life.
Yeah, no, that's great. I think these are really valuable, and it's beneficial. What for me stands out is that these are some of the core things that will not change in the future as well. And as it has been the same kind of practices that has helped many people succeed even in the past, right? Yeah. So I want to talk a little bit about the space that you've been operating in the last 15 years, right? The semiconductor industry space has evolved so much. It's become so important to drive the world and transform the world. And as they call it, we're staring at a chip war. This is something that Dr. Jaishankar talked about very recently in one of his podcasts, and it was so fascinating how the government also is so interested in all of these things internationally, right? So how is this going to impact the world in the next 5-10 years? What should we know about the semiconductor space?
I don't know where to start out here, but just think about it and just look around you. Electronics has touched every part of our life. And if I look back, if I look at the history of the semiconductor industry, I think we have been through 4 inflection points. The first inflection point in the semiconductor industry was, when servers and desktops came to place, and laptops maybe. That's when suddenly the demand for chips, really expanded. That was the first inflection point. The second inflection point was really your smartphones. That was a game changer. Everyone had a smartphone. You needed chips. You need more, complex chips so that they can do all these, hundreds and thousands of apps that we have. Then the third inflection really was your social media.
Of course. Yeah.
I mean, just think about it. Every day we're sending our, your WhatsApp messages, your pictures, your photos. Now you need some gigantic amount of memory space for all that. So you need chips for that. So that was another great inflection, which we are currently living in.
Yeah.
And at this point, if I look at it, the whole industry globally is worth about $500 billion. And it's a huge industry. The current inflection that we're going through is all about AI and IoT and big data.
Yeah.
And in the next 5 years, all projections are this industry is going to be a $1 trillion industry. And AI and IoT and big data is going to drive it. So I think electronics will continue to be a very important part of our job.
Sure.
And think about it. ChatGPT is a great example of that.
Yeah, of course.
I mean, how it's going to transform our life. And at the same time, I've always tell people these things should not scare us.
Yeah.
It's just a time for us to relearn and time to adapt to it.
Yeah.
I yet remember when the computers first came in, all the trade unions in India, they went on huge protests saying that this is going to take up jobs.
Wow.
It actually did not.
Yeah.
It created more jobs.
Yeah.
I'm a strong believer. Technology does take up jobs, but it creates 3 other jobs somewhere else.
Yes, of course. Yeah.
So I think the semiconductor industry is, it is the biggest thing. I'll give one more data point just to show you how big this industry is.
Yeah.
Today in India, in the next 5 years, they say our import bill of electronics will be bigger than our fuel import bill.
Wow.
That's how, and that's the reason. I think I heard you say that the government is taking a big step towards that. There is a huge program towards having your own chip manufacturing capability in the country, which is extremely important, especially now with all the geopolitical issues happening, especially with China.
Absolutely.
It's so important that countries like India have their own facilities and their own capabilities to build chips.
Interesting.
So I don't think anyone can get away or discount how these the semiconductor industry is going to impact our lives.
That's
And
fascinating.
it already has.
It only has, and it's
has.
really fascinating, right?
Yeah.
It's become so integral to each one of our lives. And the old TV, which was there in the 1980s to what is happening today, it's just fascinating. We're all living very, very differently. Right?
So I'll tell you one very small anecdote. I play squash over the weekend. So we went to a new place in Indiranagar where they have a small squash court and over the volt thing. And they have a small device which now records your scoring.
Okay.
So, on the screen you have, your scoring comes over there by that device. So we thought that, how the hell are they doing it? But
Yeah.
it's just taking over every part of it, making your life easier, obviously.
Yeah, of course. Very cool. That's the thing, right? It's just gotten into every aspect of our life. So I'm so eager to see what more can happen in that space as well, Abhay. So I want us to come closer home to what we do on a daily basis as well as practitioners. How has the space of people with an organization and people practices evolved over time, be it even with applied materials or generically speaking, right? We've seen so much change. So what are your views, what are your observations on how it's evolved?
This industry, like every other thing in the world, has evolved. I think we started the Industrial Revolution, where the whole, and that the structure that they created in the Industrial Revolution stayed with us for almost more than 100 years or maybe more. Where you had a structured workplace, everyone comes together, they collaborate, they cooperate, and they do their work in a defined workspace. And that started, and technology really has helped in changing that to a great extent. But what really triggered the change was obviously COVID. I mean, COVID was the huge game changer for all of us. For many, and we continue to believe that the only place to work was in a structured workplace. I think COVID suddenly made us realize, both the employer and the employee, that you can yet be productive outside of being in office.
Yeah.
So that was the big change that's happened.
Do you think it's the biggest change that's happened, Abhay? In all of the evolution of work?
I think I would call it one of the biggest changes that happened. Because that was change, no one even thought it was possible.
Yeah.
And suddenly realized that things are working well.
Yeah.
I don't need to be in a conference hall with 10 of my colleagues to brainstorm and come up with an idea.
Right.
I can do that over Teams, I can do that over Zoom. Now those are things that are, and this whole concept of a workplace is starting to erode. There are companies, and if I may, give an example, I think NVIDIA is a great example. And the CEOs actually said, I don't want my people to come to office more than 1 to 2 days a week.
Yeah.
So, of course, companies are also encouraging the people to come, but I think the trend is that.
Yeah.
The other thing that COVID has done is there's been a lot of, the way people look at life has changed.
Yeah.
So a lot of people, especially your Gen Z, right? That's what they call the latest. Gen Z are the folks who are now looking at companies that respect their time and their boundaries. They are looking at life. I want a work-life balance. I want that time to myself, and I want flexibility.
Right.
So in that sense, the workplace has evolved, and I think it's changed for the good or bad. As of now, it looks good. Let's see how the future holds for us. But I think this is what the future is going to look like.
And the
for us.
crux of how we develop people solutions, people programs, that's going to be centered around this,
It will
change,
all be
right?
centered around that.
Yeah.
It has to.
Yeah.
Because that's what your new workers, your new gen workers, that's what they want.
And what would your advice to industry be? Because there are organizations, there are startups, there are big companies which are actually resisting this change as well, right? Flexibility now is part of the deal, which is also helping diversity, become part of making diversity easier. For women, you can actually give them a more flexible framework of work and ensure that they are productive. But there are organizations which are under severe pressure for growth, and they believe that people have to show up, right? How do we deal with it? How can we help them evolve the mindset, or is there even a need to do that?
This again depends. I think, like I said, we are yet exploring what is working for us and not working for us. So there are companies which are saying, thank you so much, but now let's get back to our, what work actually should look like. So I'm not going to comment on what is right and wrong, because I think, the decisions yet to be made, and that we'll see only in a couple of. But I think not allowing flexibility for employees today is not the way forward. There has to be a degree of flexibility, because that's what the new generation wants, and technology is helping us do that. So I think what companies need to do is just get into the bandwagon of the digital transformation and enable people to work at their own times and be as productive as they were.
Yeah, it's the new normal, right? And earlier you started talking, where we talked about trust, right? It is the fundamental aspect of how can you just inspire so that people work wherever they are. And even with Better Place, we have a hybrid and flex policy. In fact, in one of our Malaysia hubs, half of a day is given away to people. so that they can, socially they have a lot of obligations, they have certain chores they need to complete, which you do not find time, especially in growing organizations. It can be very hectic. So how do you create something that's contextually suitable also becomes very crucial. Yeah?
And you did mention about diversity. I heard that word coming from as part of your question. I think it's also important that companies look at women in the organization and say, how can I make them more productive? I mean, statistics tell us that attrition amongst women is always slightly higher than the male population because they are finally the primary caretakers in the house. They are the people who have to go back and, or they follow their husbands. Those are things that happen all the time. What can a company do to, create platforms so that they continue to work for us, but they also have that flexibility to take care of their responsibilities at home?
Yeah. No, absolutely, and it's nothing but exciting, and I'm loving being part of the industry and being part of it. And we talked about it some time back, right? That this is a great time to be
oh my God, it's
part
exciting.
of HR, and there's so much going on as well. So I want to shift gear closer to labor and labor workforce. The space that we also operate in, right, Abhay, it's largely leaning towards blue collar workers and frontline worker space, right? What we have noticed is that the white collar worker space, which is largely your professionals, your IT professionals, doctors, etc., the laws are well suited, it's well defined, it's better defined, if not perfect, where there is clarity in terms of what they can access, right? What this population like yourself and me, we know that when we come to work, we have certain benefits. But that's not really true. And much is pending to be done for the blue collar worker space, the people who are basically a part of gig or even unorganized sector. The baseline alone in India is 400 million, and I know when we first
you've given a
talked
number,
about
and I'm here trying to digest that.
So every time we go out and talk and we explain that this population is so huge and can make such a big difference to society and our entire economy, people just are baffled that, oh God, is it really that big a problem? So one of the things that I want to explore in conversation is, for white collar workers, be it maternity, etc., industry stepped in way ahead of when government making a 6-month maternity period for maternity leave. Companies had already started doing this. They had started giving women 6-month leave, and they were very aggressive. They were very, very clear about their diversity agenda. How can we, and how can industry actually step forward and make a difference to the blue collar worker population? And what is your advice? How do we go about it? Because everywhere we go, there are problems and pain points that industry talks about. What are those few things that we could already think about in this direction as well?
Sure. So, Mohana, when you talk about blue collar workers, there are two parts of it.
Sure.
One is your contract labor and one is your gig workers. Now, gig workers is really a new phenomena, and your e-commerce has really triggered that out. Now, to some extent, and I'm sure there's a lot more we can do, there are a lot of laws which do protect contract labor. You have your Industrial Disputes Act, that is it. You have your Contract Labor Act, Regulation Abolition 1970 Act, which does very clearly provides the policies and processes which protect these workers. And the fact that the employer, who is employing this, is a primary employer.
Yes.
Now, it is the responsibility of the employer to make sure that the contract worker who's working on your side is treated with the same, benefits that you can't get the same benefits that your employers are getting, but you have to ensure that the primary vendor is providing those benefits to them, and those should be as part of your agreement and contract that you sign with them. Okay, so in that sense, they are yet protected, but there's a lot more to be done over there. What is the interesting part, and which is new to our workforce, is the gig worker. Now, the gig worker, again, there are two parts of it. There are a lot of gig workers who are doing this because they want the flexibility.
Right.
They don't want to be part of a structure. They don't want to be an organized, and that's why they want to be a gig worker. I mean, there can be no better example than an Uber driver.
Yeah.
I don't think he or she wants to be part of it. He wants to do that for two reasons. Maybe they want some extra cash. I'm not doing this in the evening, I'll go and run my Uber.
Yeah.
Or they could be doing that because, they want to live in an unstructured. But I think the gig workers have become such a large population. Like you said, this 400 million population, a lot of them are gig workers. And I think across the world, people are looking at what should be the regulations in place that will support these people.
Yeah.
In India, there are talks, and I'm sure things will come very soon, where they would come under the the Contract Labor Act.
Interesting.
And that is a possibility. That's the only, policy that will support the gig workers. But it's working with gig workers is something that we're all learning to deal with now. We don't know where they are, how do we deal with them?
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's really important, because there is so much opportunity also that's staring at us to sort of continue in that direction of encouraging contract labor, encouraging gig as well, right? And the next generation is leaning more towards, in certain spaces at least, they want to formalize gig in that, if I could put it that way, right? In terms of just contract labor itself, I know you have significant experience in managing contract labor workers. Contract labor workers in in manufacturing setups, let's say for example, they also do frontline space, right? They are last mile delivery, or they're sitting in factories, and there's a lot of frontline is the big word here, and then you have contract labor that's part of it. But contract labor itself brings a lot of its own complexities and nuances and challenges. What are some of the challenges that you've noticed in managing contract labor at large?
So I think I did mention to you before, in Applied we do have a good mix of we call FTs, as you call them, or we call them RFTs, regular full-time, and contractors. So there is almost 60-40 at this point. Now let me first tell you, why do we, in which are the areas that we prefer to hire contractors, and I'm sure no different from any other. They would be like your IT application could be a great thing. Your backroom support could be a great thing. Or they could be where there are niche skills which are not available with the company. You want, so you get contract labor from there. Or most important, you do it for flexibility.
Sure.
Now, in industries, especially our industry, it's a very cyclical industry. So there are ramp ups and ramp downs. So when you want a sudden ramp up, you take these contractors. Okay?
Sure.
Now, for them, for us, our contractors, we make it a point to make sure we go to these big vendors.
Sure.
These smaller vendors, not that they will not do a good job, but I think the ability to really provide all the benefits. So what we make sure is that they come from the big vendors, and they are very closely monitored in terms of, are they getting the legitimate benefits that all of them are.
Right.
What we also do, because the fact that a lot of them work on our site, is all the basic training when it comes to the values, it comes to safety, they are very much part of what the FTEs go through.
Sure.
So that will also help them integrate into the structure, into the values of the company. And let's not forget, while the contract worker, they could be a contractor, but if they're dealing with a customer, if at times they do need to, if they are the face of Applied.
Right.
So it is our responsibility to make sure that they are as well trained in the values of our company. So one of the things we do very strong is we make sure that our managers, role model these values at all times, because then that is also how it's reflected in the rest of the organization.
Yeah. No, that's great.
And but yes, we have to always, there's a line that we have to be, we have to be cautious about, because there are contractors, they are there for a, fixed period of time.
Yeah.
The other problem that we have always seen for working with contractors is there's a lot of training required for them, which is true, because they're coming from a different industry, we train them over there. And there is also a lot of, the attrition over there is slightly higher. So very often you train them and they're not permanent employees. They move on and they move to, so we lose that skill. At times you cannot really use them where there's IP related, where there's core job and IP related work involved. You don't use contractors there. I think, so contractors, while they bring a lot of benefits, there are also flip side of it.
Of course, and it's a bit of a quagmire, right? Because you know that it is already a shorter term that you're employing people for, and within that you are actually seeing high attrition, and then you're trying to actually have them assimilate into your organization itself, but then they leave you faster. So there's a lot of the idea is that contract labor is also supporting an organization when there's a sudden ramp up, or like we discussed,
or ramp down.
Ramp down, yes, of course, ramp down. Very good point. And also, if you have a newer skill that a company is trying to explore, you're seeing that we'll experiment through contract contractors or short-term assignments, and then you can actually look at converting it, right?
Yeah.
So it's a pretty fascinating space, and the laws are not really, like we discussed, right, earlier, Abhay, that you were mentioning that the laws are also grey. Can you comment on that a little bit so that we can help our audience also sort of understand your view on this?
So I thought we covered that in the last time. So is there something more? I mean, talk about the Contract Labour Act. So is there anything specific
Is the Contract
that you
Labour
had?
Act clear for organizations to adopt it easily as well?
Okay, good. Not really. There is certain degree. I won't say the grey area. It's all open to interpretation to some extent. There's a little degree of interpretation which could be different from the. So the laws are not very black and white. Don't forget, all the laws were written many, many years ago.
Sure.
I think the labour laws of India were primarily when they were put in place. They were basically for the tea workers and the mill owners, mill workers. Now that's almost before partition and just after partition. So you're talking about laws that are quite old in their thing. So they are not, a lot of the laws do not recognize what IT workers are, what these are people who work in the IT field. So their laws are more towards the classical blue collar manufacturing workers. Okay. So in that area it's very unclear. So like a simple example, your ID Act, Industrial Dispute Act. We are not very sure whether this also applies to someone, a software engineer. Do they come under that? Yes, under the definition of a workman, they might come, but do the laws really apply to them? So, like you see, the IT industry, we've not seen too many or many companies which have a union. So there are these grey areas which have not evolved to the times, to the current times.
No, I think just on that note, it's very interesting, and it is transforming. The space is really, really transforming. And I know we've been deeply looking at such an important space that we are all part of as HR practitioners. I want to keep it a little lighter now in the next 2 minutes. So, Abhay, we are open to a small rapid fire, right? Either we look at just a choice question or just a small sentence. I'd love to get your view so people know what you feel about something. So are you ready? We can start.
Okay.
Yeah.
Always.
So tech or human? Tech versus human.
Oh, human. Always. Tech is an enabler. Human is what drives the company.
Okay, that's great. FTE versus gig?
FTE, I would say, difficult question. FTE, but there has to be a good mix. I mean, like I told you, the reason why we do, but I think both are important components of an organization.
Awesome. Semiconductor then versus now?
Oh my God, semiconductors before was only thing that we could think about was memory and some logic. Today we are looking at semiconductors that are artificial intelligence. We're looking at machine learning. It's just transformed.
Awesome. Biggest myth in HR?
Biggest?
Myth in HR.
Biggest myth in HR is we are a hiring firing company and we do rangolis. I hate it when I hear from that.
I've heard that so many times.
I just hate that. I think we have moved way beyond that.
Way beyond that. I could not agree more. One cool practice in HR that you like?
One cool practice that I think this whole practice of creating something which helps a business be successful.
That's great. Why do most workers complain about their jobs?
I'm going to talk about MNC. I think they complain about two things. One is mainly managers and the second is time zone issues.
Interesting. One employee engagement concern.
This again, I'm going to go back to COVID. I think employee engagement today is where we don't have people coming to office. We don't have face-to-face time with them. That engagement is not happening.
Okay, that's great. One obvious thing HR professionals miss out.
They miss out on the fact that they are not closely connected to business. They always try to, they cannot work in a pigeonhole. We are here to support the business and make them successful. We are not well connected to business.
One important quality in a CHRO that is needed?
I think one needs to be thick-skinned and not get frazzled by arrogant and demanding employees.
Last question for the beautiful conversation that we've had. One advice to all aspiring HR leaders.
That's simple. Be flexible, be nimble, be curious.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much, Abhay. I've enjoyed this. It's been a lot of serious topics, it's a lot of fun topics, and understanding you better. So thank you for spending time with us today.
Mona,
I
thank
loved
you so
it.
much.
Yeah.
I think, thank you for bringing me out here, and it was great
Yeah.
getting to know you better and talking to you. Thanks
Same
a lot.
here. Thank you.